Radioactive iodine in seawater samples around the plant 7.5 million times higher than the government's legal limit. Tokyo Electric Power Company says it detected 300,000 becquerels of iodine-131 per cubic centimeter in samples taken around the water intake of the number 2 reactor before noon on Saturday. It also found 200,000 becquerels of radioactive iodine, an amount 5 million times higher than the limit, in samples taken at the same spot on Monday morning. Monday's sample also shows cesium-137, whose half-life is 30 years, at 1.1 million times higher than the national limit. TEPCO has been checking radioactive materials in the sea around the plant because water containing high levels of these substances has been pouring out of cracked concrete pit near the number 2 reactor. Highly contaminated water was detected earlier there. On March 27th, 13 million becquerels of iodine-131 per cubic centimeter were detected in the water in the basement of the turbine building. 3 days later, contaminated water was found in a nearby tunnel. Professor Koji Okamoto of the Graduate School of the University of Tokyo says it has become clear that high level of radioactive substances from the reactor are pouring into the sea. He says the flow of radioactive water must be stopped immediately. Local fishermen and residents in Fukushima are expressing deep concern over ongoing measures to release the low levels of radioactive water into the ocean.
This person says that she's so concerned that she cannot think anything. And she says people are living through the means of fishing, so even though the fishing should resume, because of the bad rumor or ungrounded rumor in place, nobody would want to buy the fish caught off the sea of Fukushima. So she says she needs to have the compensation done by TEPCO as soon as possible. This man who runs a restaurant shows the menu he's been serving, and he says that though people can eat, the people who come, consumers, will feel concerned. And asked about the discharge of contaminated water into the sea, he says that he's worried if that measure would prolong.
Meanwhile, a port in Chiba has refused to unload the catch of a fishing boat from a neighboring prefecture. The boat from Ibaraki Prefecture had earlier suspended operations because of the situation at the plant.
The catch by Daigo Matsumaru, which is a trawling boat which belongs to the Hasaki fishermen's industry in Kamisu City in Ibaraki Prefecture, was rejected to unload its catch. Daigo Matsumaru started fishing in the morning and then returned with his catch. And this fisherman says that he doesn't know the reason why, but he says he doesn't understand why it's been rejected. And regarding this rejection of the unloading, Ibaraki Prefecture says that it needs to find out the details.
Concerns over fish and other marine products are growing as radioactive iodine has been detected in tiny fish caught off waters to the south of the Fukushima Daiichi plant. NHK World's Yoichiro Osaki gives us more information on the situation.
And from the nuclear power plant, contaminated water is being released. And from Honna and Ibaraki Prefecture, radiation has been detected from sand eel, and that is 4,080 becquerels for 1 kilogram of sand eel. And the Minister of Health says that is not a level that is harmful to human health. But these conditions have all been unforeseen because the Ministry of Health and Welfare standards have been set based on indicators set as guidelines by the Nuclear Safety Commission. But for iodine in fish, no standard has been set because iodine has a half-life of 8 days, and they assume that by the time people eat the fish, the level of iodine in the fish would have been greatly reduced. But if the release of radioactive substances from Fukushima is to continue, standards need to be considered. And radioactive substances are still being discharged from the nuclear power plant. So there will be new radioactive iodine being discharged. So inside the fish, the half-life will help reduce amounts, but the fish will be taking in new amounts of iodine. Therefore, fishermen and consumers are probably very apprehensive. So the ministry and government need to indicate new standards as soon as possible. For drinking water and milk and dairy products, there are standards which have been set, and for vegetable also. So for meat and fish, standards are required. Is that correct? That's right. And the Minister of Education has said that the ministry will step up inspections for marine products. And stepping up inspections, what does he mean? Minister Kano said that inspections will be stepped up. Until now, inspections have been conducted, but the survey points will be increased for finding out how much radioactive substances has accumulated in the fish. So increasing the survey points, that's right. And since yesterday, low-level contaminated water has been discharged from the nuclear power plant, and that is worrying people, and some people are outraged. And above all, the survey and inspection should be stepped up, and clear standards and criteria need to be set as soon as possible. And the discharge of contaminated water with low levels of radiation, that's considered to be an emergency measure. But that indicates to us that the work going on at the nuclear power plant has become very critical and urgent. So what measures are required right now? From the nuclear power plant, low-level contaminated water is being discharged, but also at the plant, there is high-level radiation contaminated water in the plant facilities, which is 1 million more times the concentration, and that needs to be controlled. And today, liquid glass will be injected, or is being considered to be injected, to solidify the wastewater underneath certain facilities in the stone stratum.
More than 400 nuclear power plants throughout the world are generating electricity. In Asia, China and India have made nuclear energy a priority to maintain their economic growth. Southeast Asian countries are following suit. But after the crisis in Fukushima, some are having second thoughts. NHK World's Mari Yamada reports from Vietnam.
News of the Fukushima crisis reached Vietnam just as it was about to build its first nuclear power plant.
Nhà máy điện hạt nhân tại Nhật Bản do ảnh hưởng của động đất và sóng thần đã làm dư luận dấy lên một mối lo ngại về rò rỉ phóng xạ không chỉ tại Nhật Bản mà còn ảnh hưởng tới một số nước lân cận, trong đó có Việt Nam.
On this coastal farmland in the south lies the site for Southeast Asia's first nuclear plant. Japanese companies will be supporting the construction of 2 reactors here. They are to start operating in 10 years. The Vietnamese government plans to have 14 nuclear reactors by 2030. Now anxiety is beginning to spread. Before the Fukushima crisis, many didn't know much about nuclear power.
Well, all I know is that they use nuclear power to generate electricity. Radioactive leaks will affect human health, won't they?
The growing prosperity lights up cities across the country. Its economy grew 6.8% last year. The government says the country needs more electricity to meet demand. and the expanding market has attracted international competition. France, Russia, South Korea and others are trying to sell their nuclear plants. Japanese firms pitched the safety and sophistication of their technology at this government trade fair. Last October, the Japanese Prime Minister proudly announced that his country would partner Vietnam in reactor construction. The deal was an example of Japan's new strategy that focuses on exporting products for public works.
This marks the historic beginning of Japan and Vietnam as partners in the construction of nuclear power plants.
In the wake of the Fukushima crisis, Japan's ambassador is busy. Yasuaki Tanizaki meets with officials explaining the country's safety measures.
I believe Vietnam has trust in Japan's advanced nuclear technology. The important thing now is to explain how Japan is also capable of ensuring nuclear safety.
The Vietnamese government held an urgent briefing for local media. It stressed the planned reactors will be the latest models and safe. The Deputy Prime Minister reaffirms that the country will continue its nuclear project as planned.
We will carefully consider all aspects of safety, including the technology, plant locations, and protection against extreme earthquakes and tsunami.
Asia's emerging countries are anxious to provide their own energy to keep their economies growing. But Japan's crisis has made Vietnamese people think twice about nuclear power. Mari Yamada, NHK World, Hanoi.
As of Tuesday morning, the death toll in Japan's March 11th quake and tsunami has exceeded 12,000. Another 15,000 people remain unaccounted for. In the country's northeast, more than 160,000 people are living in shelters. Japan's National Police Agency says around 82% of recovered bodies have been identified and handed over to their families. It says the number of dead could rise because some tsunami-hit municipalities have yet to determine if everyone is accounted for. On top of that, search operations have been suspended within the 20-kilometer evacuation zone around the troubled nuclear power plant in Fukushima. The police say about 164,000 people have been staying in shelters in 17 prefectures. Some of them have fled their hometowns because of what's happening at the nuclear plant. Recovering from the devastation may be a hard and long road, but survivors are gradually rebuilding their daily lives. Some people are placing their hopes on being able to move into a prefabricated temporary home, but the numbers are far from sufficient.
In the disaster zone this morning, temperatures fell below zero in many places. Provisional housing or temporary housing is being built quickly in Rikuzen Takata City, and the first completed 32 houses were put up for lottery. And 1,160 households applied, which made the house-to-applicant ratio 32 times. The mayor of Rikuzen Takata says that there are so many applicants, they need to build housing as soon as possible. And the first batch of people who won the lottery this time will be able to enter their houses in October. The city is planning to build in total 1,800 houses. This is Kesennuma City in Miyagi Prefecture. A facility for providing vocational training to people with disabilities reopened today. The residents here are making merchandise with the feature character of Kesennuma City. This user of the facility says that for reconstruction he also wants to make a big effort.